Hi guys, welcome to another video on how to solve situational questions in the PMP exam. In this video today, we will pick some situational questions which are of similar difficulty level that you can expect in your PMP exam. To solve these situational questions, we'll be using this framework that we have learned in this video, okay? So make sure you watch that video first before you come back and start solving the situational questions that we'll be discussing in this video. And you will never face any difficulty to solve these type of questions in your PMP exam. So my fellow PMPs, let's get started with question number 1. Question number 1 guys, pause the video, read the question carefully and try to answer it. Okay, we will start answering the question. So step number 1 is ensuring the positive bias and making sure that we read each option very carefully and reject an option only on solid grounds. Okay, so step number 2 is checking the question stem to categorize it as a type 1 or a type 2 question. Now if you see the question stem here, it says that what should you do next, or what should the project manager do next, which gives us the indication that this is a type 2 question. Moving on to step 3, we identify which knowledge area or process group this question is referring to. Now if you see here that you are reviewing a schedule and you see that the schedule is behind by 4 weeks and you are trying to address it, so you are somewhere between the execution and the monitoring and controlling phase, and you are more about in the control schedule phase. Okay, with that we move on to step 4 and try to read every option, analyze it with the context of what we have identified so far, and try to eliminate it on solid grounds. Okay, so option A, crash the project. Okay, we will hold this option for a while, we'll come back to it later. Maybe crashing the project reduces the schedule of a project, so this can be an option. Okay, resource level the project. Okay, we can hold this option as well. Let's come back to it. Cut scope for the project. Okay, now this is outright a wrong option guys, so you can eliminate it totally now, because cutting the scope of the project is not something which a project manager should do outright. Okay, so whenever you cut the scope of the project, there is a change management which needs to be initiated and it needs to be aligned with all the stakeholders, etc, etc. So you should follow the proper steps when you cut the scope. Okay, so this is a wrong option. Moving on to option number D, fast tracking the project. Okay, we will hold this option as well. So maybe fast tracking the project can be a right option, because once you fast track the project, you actually are using schedule compression technique to get the project back in schedule. Now we are left with option A, B and D. Now let's go back to option A, crashing the project. Now if you see the definition of crashing the project guys, crashing is a technique which is used to shorten the schedule. Okay, but you should also note that it may result in increased cost or increased risk. Now in this question, it says that your CPI of the project is 1 and you do not have the luxury of hiring extra resources. Okay, so you cannot hire extra resources from outside. And also if you see this line, that there is a severe resource crunch in your organization as well, so you cannot crash the project by hiring extra resources either from within your organization or externally. So crashing the project is a wrong option for that reason. And also crashing the project generally increases cost, but since your CPI is at 1, you can't afford to increase your cost. Okay, so crashing the project is a wrong option. Now resource leveling the project. So if you go to the definition of resource leveling, you will see that it is only used when resources are over allocated, or generally when you have resources which is assigned to 2 or more activities, and it often results in the original critical path to change. And generally when you do resource leveling, the critical path of the project increases. Now if you go back to the question, you are not looking for an option to increase the critical path of the project, you are looking to get the project done on schedule. Okay, so that is the reason why resource leveling the project here will not help, because at the end of the day, even if you level the resources of the project, your actual project will be off track in terms of your schedule. So resource leveling of the project is also a wrong option. Okay, which gives you option D as the correct option for this question, because once you fast track the project, what you essentially do is you try to organize any activities which were initially planned in series to go in parallel, and that is why you go with option D, which is fast tracking the project, and this is the right option.
Before moving on to the next question, I'll recommend that you visit my website PMPwithRay.com to sign up for my email series. I have discussed a lot of tips for the PMP exam, such as what should be the study plan, what are the resources that you can use in the PMP exam, what to expect on the exam day, and a lot more through my email series. So make sure you sign up for that one. Okay. Now let's move on to question number 2.
Question number 2, guys. Read the question, read the options carefully, and try to answer it before moving ahead. Okay, so we will start with step number 1. We will ensure that we have the positive bias while we analyze any option and only reject based on solid grounds. Step number 2, we check for the question stem. So if you see the question stem here, it is asking what's the best course of action as a project manager. So it is essentially indicating to the ideal project manager behavior framework, and that is why this is a type 1 question. So with that, we move on to step number 3, that we start to analyze the options with the ideal project manager behavior framework and try to reject any option on solid grounds. Okay, so option A, implement your contingency plan. So now this option is very vague, guys. So if you see implement your contingency plan, it doesn't essentially say that what that plan is. There can be 1,001 plans which you can implement here as contingencies. So you can get extra resources from outside, you can escalate it to your sponsor, you can work it out with the functional manager, you can cut scope, you can cut quality. So there are a lot of things you can look into it while implementing your contingency plan, but here this option specifies none of the contingency plans. Okay, so it's a very vague option, and that is why we eliminate this option right away. Option B, escalate the issue to functional manager's boss and ensure your project gets priority. Okay, that is also a wrong option, guys, because if you see the ideal project manager behavior framework, you will see that a good project manager always owns up issues and problems himself rather than delegations. Escalation is the last resort for him. And here in this option, what you are essentially trying to do is escalating as a first step, which is not recommendable. So that is why this option is outright a wrong option. Okay, so option A and option B are eliminated. We go to option C, negotiate with the functional manager to help allocate alternate resources. Okay, we will hold this option because that seems like a reasonable option, that you can negotiate with the functional manager and ask him to allocate any alternate resources if he has to keep your project going. So we will hold this option for a while. Option D, start resource leveling and resource smoothing operations to get back on track. Okay, this can also be a correct option. You can use resource leveling, you can use resource smoothing as well. So we have eliminated option A and B, but we are left with option C and option D. And so now what we do is we go back and iterate the full process and look at option C and option D once again. Okay, now if you look at option D, guys, it is saying that starting resource leveling and resource smoothing operations. Now this actually goes against your project manager behavior framework. So if you see point number 12 of our ideal project manager behavior framework, you will see that it mentions a project manager knows and exercises his authority and credibility in the right way to ensure the best interests of all. Now with the reference of that behavior, if you see option D, you see here that the project manager here is not exercising any of his authority or credibility. So whenever you are project manager, you should always remember that any project happens with the best interest of the company. So a functional manager cannot come and outright take the resources away without providing any additional help or any additional negotiations to plan for any alternatives. Okay, now if you let your resources go just like that, anybody will come to you and take your resources away from your project. Okay, now here you need to put your step ahead and work as a more inclusive project manager and work with the functional manager to identify whether there are any alternative options left or not. You cannot just let your resources go and jump right onto the other steps such as resource leveling or resource smoothing. That way you are not behaving as an ideal project manager, and that is why this option, which is option D, is a wrong option. So we have option C, which is the correct option, and that is negotiating with the functional manager to help allocate alternate resources to your project, and that is the best course of action you can take as an ideal project manager for this question.
Before moving on to the next question, I would like to thank you all for the amazing words of appreciation that I have received from you guys over emails and comments. These are the ones that really keep me going, guys. So thank you, thank you, thank you for that. And now let's move on to question number 3.
Question number 3, guys. Pause the video, read the question and try to answer it before moving forward. Okay, so we'll start answering the question. Step number 1, we will ensure positive bias while we read the options and reject an option only if we get a very solid reason to reject it. Okay, and with that we move on to step number 2 to identify the stem of the question. So it's saying that as a project manager, what should you communicate to your sponsor as a result of doing this? So that essentially is indicating towards a type 1 question, which is based on the ideal project manager behavior framework. And with that, we move on to step 3, which is we will start analyzing the options with the ideal project manager behavior framework and reject any one of them on solid grounds. So option number 1, activities will be performed in parallel. Okay, so this is a good option, guys. We can hold this option for now because if you perform the activities in parallel, it essentially is saying that in a way or the other you may be doing a fast tracking of your project. So this can be a right option. Let's hold it for now. Option B, scope will get revised. Okay, so this is outright a wrong option, because if you look at point number 2 of our ideal project manager behavior framework, it says that a good project manager should hold the scope of the project sacrosanct. So revising the scope is the last resort, and it goes through a formal change management procedure which is approved by the CCB and the sponsor. Okay, so this question is not indicating anything towards it, so this option B gets eliminated. Option C, rework will result. Now this is a very broad option, guys. It doesn't really say that what kind of rework will result, and essentially if you are trying to expedite a project, that does not necessarily mean that rework will always result. Okay, you can still accelerate a project without resulting in any rework if you plan it meticulously. Okay, so it does not have to be necessarily true that whenever you accelerate a project, reworks will result. So this is also a quite broad option, and that is why we eliminate option C as well. Costs and risks will increase. That's option D. Okay, now this is also a possible option, guys, because whenever you do fast tracking or crashing or any kind of schedule acceleration, it always carries some risks and some costs with it. Okay, so we have eliminated option B and option C, and we are left with option A and option D. Now if you look at option A, guys, it is saying that activities will be performed in parallel. Now here most of the students will mark option A, and option A is the wrong answer, guys. So I will tell you why. Listen very carefully. Activities being performed in parallel does not necessarily mean that you are doing fast tracking. Okay, it is actually the reverse. That is, when you are doing fast tracking, it means that you have to perform some activities in parallel, but it does not mean that whenever you are performing activities in parallel, you are doing fast tracking. So it's not the other way around, which is very important. And if you see here, it is only telling activities, right? It is not telling that critical activities. Be very careful. Now, when you do fast tracking of a project, it is mainly done on the critical activities. It is not just done on any activity, right? So even if you do fast tracking on any one of the activities, if it is not on critical path, it will not help your schedule to accelerate. So option A is a very close option and is beautifully written to just fool you or to trick you into selecting the option which will be a wrong option. Okay, so with that, we say that option A is also wrong option because it does not give any detail in terms of which activities will be performed in parallel. So the correct answer is option D, which is costs and risks will increase. So if you read the PMBOK, read the part of the fast tracking and crashing, and you will see that it is written that whenever you do any schedule accelerations or any schedule compression techniques, your costs and risks will increase. And that is also very true for real life projects. And that is why option D is the correct option for this question.
I hope today's video was useful and you are one step ahead towards becoming a master in solving situational questions in your PMP exam. Don't forget to like, subscribe and share this video, and also recommend this video to your peers and your colleagues. Okay, so thank you for watching today's video, and I'll see you again soon in another video like this. Bye bye.